Hello and welcome our blood viewers to RTD's News English Edition. As usual, we'll begin our tonight's news with the top major highlights. The head of state, Mr. Ismail Umar Ghali, presides over the 14th meeting of the Council of Ministers. The President of the Assembly receives his counterparts from Africa, Djibouti African Parliamentarian Union. And on the international scene in Afghanistan, Taliban in search of recognition meet European Union's representatives. Those were the major top highlights. Welcome back to our newsroom, our beloved viewers. Under the chairmanship of His Excellency Mr. Ismail Umar Ghali, President of the Republic, Head of Government, took place this Tuesday, October 12, 2021, the 14th session of the Council of Ministers. Ministry of Budget, first question. Draft Finance Law on the amending budget of the state for fiscal year 2021. The draft amending budget of the state for the fiscal year 2021 is topped in receipts and expenditure to more than 146 billion francs, Djibouti. The adoption of the draft amending law comes in a context of resumption of economic growth despite the presence of the crisis of COVID-19. This growth will reach 7.9% of nominal GDP in 2021 and should remain on an upward trend over the next 4 years with an average of 8.2%. The draft amending law incorporates new measures aimed at correcting and maintaining acceptable revenue and expenditure levels. On the revenue side, it aims to provide the conditions for achieving its objectives through the correction of the general rates of patients on the expenditure side. The finance bill includes the operating operations of the new ministries resulting from the last reshuffle, as well as the newly created embassies. Ministry of Economy and Finance in charge of industry, second question. Draft law on the restructuring of public establishments. Since the last 20 years, the expansion of the public administrative establishments has gone from 8 structures to 54 establishments, represented in terms of a budget on evaluation going from 3 billion to 14 billion and representing a warning burden within the economic and financial apparatus of the state. It is within this framework that the restructuring of the EPS is planned, which reflects the government's desire to find ways and means to achieving the national authorization of public expenditure. The expected results of this reform are, on the one hand, to correct the redundancy of missions with the central administration, to reduce the budgetary impact in terms of direct or indirect subsidies, and to reduce the cost of management, and on the other hand, to strengthen the administrative and financial management of public establishments. The adoption of this bill will improve efficiency in the use of public resources. Ministry of National Education and Vocational Training, third question. Draft degree amending degree number 2005 83/PR/MENSOP establishing the modalities of the creation and operation of private secondary or higher education establishments. The purpose of the draft degree is to amend degree number 2583 PR MENSOP. This text aims to further strengthen the conditions of teaching, especially in the quality of teaching learning, by offering private establishments that request adequate pedagogical supervision, quality initial and continuous training, access to digital resources, and independent national evaluations. The Ministry of Education wishes to integrate private establishments into the process of transforming the education system that it has been engaged in for the past 3 years within the framework of the project for the expansion of learning opportunities. MENFOP has put in place a national strategy for the development of preschools with a view to strengthening and diversifying preschool education offerings. Within this framework, it plans to involve private educational systems and institutions in the development of preschools in the capital and in the regions. The adaptation of the project will therefore be part of this context and should have a positive impact on the consideration of the people's achievements, who will thus be better prepared for elementary school. In the second part of the 14th session of the Council of Ministers, the draft degrees continues. Ministry of Trade and Tourism. Fifth question. Draft order establishing the committee in charge of the organizations of the 7th edition of the International African Textile Fair. The purpose of this draft order is to set up a committee in charge of the organization of the 7th edition of the International African Textile Fair, which will be held in Djibouti from 28 to 30 October 2021. This committee will be in charge of the organization, the coordination, and the realization of all the activities related to the organizations of this international fair. Ministry of City, Urbanism, and Housing. Sixth question. Draft degree appointing a Director General of the Real Estate and Land Development Opportunity. Mrs. Haifa Abdi Ibrahim is appointed Director General of the Real Estate and Land Development Company, replacing Mr. Abdullah Ismail Abdullahi, called to other functions. Ministry of Budget. Seventh question. Draft degree on the appointment of accounting officers. The following are appointed. Mr. Muhammad Sahal Haj Ismail, Accounting Officer of the Electricity of Djibouti. Mr. Abdul Fattah Umar Farah, Accounting Officer of CRIPIN, the Vocational Training Fund, and the Leadership and Entrepreneurship Center. Mrs. Fatuma Yusuf, Accounting Officer of Ali Sabih Hospital. Communications. The Minister of Interior reported on his participation in the 72nd session of the Executive Committee of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which held from October 4 to 8 in Geneva. The Minister of Higher Education and Research reported on his working visit to Multiply from October 4th to 7th, 2021. The President of the Republic, His Excellency Mr. Ismail Omar Guelleh, sent this Tuesday a message of congratulations to the King of the Kingdom of Spain, His Majesty Felipe VI, whose country celebrates today the anniversary of its National Day. In his message, President Guelleh wished health and happiness to King Felipe VI, as well as more development, prosperity, and fulfillment to the friendly Spanish people. The people and government of Djibouti also join me in expressing their sympathy to the Spanish nation on the occasion of the commemoration of the national anniversary of your country, wrote the head of state. The Republic of Djibouti is delighted with the ties of friendship and cooperation that bind it to the Kingdom of Spain, and is determined to increase the level of fruitful cooperation it shares with it in a number of crucial sectors, including the fight against maritime piracy. He continued, "Be sure, Your Majesty, that you will always find with the government and people of Djibouti all the necessary support to strengthen the relations of exchange, solidarity, brotherhood between our two nations." The head of state also noticed, reiterating his warm congratulations to King Felipe VI of Spain. A similar message was also sent to the President of the Government of the Kingdom of Spain, His Excellency Pedro Sanchez. The President of the National Assembly and President of the African Parliamentarian Union, His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, received this morning the President of the Assembly of Mali, Mrs. Haidara Sista, who is in Djibouti as part of the 76th session of the Executive Committee of the APU. The discussions focused mainly on the way and means to strengthen bilateral relations between the two countries and the two peoples, brothers and friends. The President of the National Assembly, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, welcomed the President of the Assembly and her delegation and reiterated his unfailing support. The President also received this morning the head of the Nigerian parliamentary delegation in Djibouti as part of the 76th session of the Executive Committee of the APU. The discussions focused on the way and means of strengthening bilateral relations between Niger and Djibouti. The President of the National Assembly, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, welcomed the President of the Assembly and her delegation and reiterated his unwavering support. Then he continued to receive the head of the parliamentary delegation of the Central African Republic, who are in Djibouti as part of the 76th session of the Executive Committee of the APU. The discussions focused mainly on the ways and means of strengthening bilateral relations between the Central African Republic and Djibouti. The President of the National Assembly and President of the African Parliamentarian Union, His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, received the head of the parliamentary delegation of Cameroon, who are in Djibouti as part of the 76th session of the Executive Committee of the APU. The discussions focused mainly on the ways and means of strengthening bilateral relations between the two countries and the two brotherly and friendly peoples. The President of the National Assembly, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, welcomed the President of the Assembly and her delegation and reiterated his unwavering support. On his side, the head of the delegation from Cameroon did not fail to congratulate the executive committee for this beautiful organization which is currently held in Djibouti. Then, the President of the National Assembly and President of the African Parliamentarian Union, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, received the head of the parliamentary delegation of Zimbabwe, who are in Djibouti as part of the 76th session of the Executive Committee of the APU. The discussions focused mainly on the ways and means of strengthening bilateral relations between the two countries and the two brotherly and friendly peoples. The President of the National Assembly, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, welcomed the President of the Assembly and her delegation and reiterated his unwavering support. For the part, the head of the Zambian delegation congratulated the president in particular and Djibouti in general for his hospitality and his sense of organization of great event of the UPA. Finally, the president of the National Assembly received the head of the Rwandinian parliamentary delegation who are in Djibouti as part of the 76th session of the Executive Committee of the APU. The discussions focused mainly on the ways and means of strengthening bilateral relations between the two countries and the two brotherly and friendly peoples. The President of the National Assembly welcomed the President of the Assembly and her delegation and reiterated his unwavering support. The head of the Rwandan delegation congratulated the organization for the 76th session of the Executive Committee and the 43rd Conference of the African Parliamentary Union. The President of the Assembly, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, also received the courtesy visit of the new coordinator of the United Nations system in Djibouti, Mr. Eric Overest. The President welcomed the new resident representative of the United Nations system, who thanked him for his welcome. The President of the Assembly promised his support and the support of the Djiboutian Parliament for the success of his missions during his stay in Djibouti. The new coordinator of the United Nations system, Mr. Eric, promised his commitment to the government and the Djiboutian Parliament to support development projects in the Republic of Djibouti. After depositing these letters with the President of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, the new ambassador of the Republic of Djibouti in Addis and permanent representative to the African Union, Mr. Abdi Mahmoud, deposited his signatures with the Chairman of the African Union Commission, Mr. Moussa Faki. During this meeting, the Djibouti ambassador presented the Chairman of the Commission with the credentials accrediting him as permanent representative of his country to the African Union. On this occasion, the Djibouti ambassador conveyed to the Chairman of the African Union Commission two warm greetings of President Mr. Ismail Omar Gelle, who he said appreciates at its true value the efforts of the chairman of the Commission for a more dynamic Africa, oriented towards prosperity. The permanent representative of the Republic of Djibouti also reiterated the commitment of the Republic of Djibouti to continue to take part in the construction of the new Africa. On Tuesday, October 11th and Tuesday, October 12th, tripartite committees representing MENFOP, the Ministry of the Budget and the Ministry of Labor, Formalization and Social Protection on the one hand, and MENFOP, the Ministry of Communication in charge of posts and telecommunications, and the Ministry of the City, Housing and Urbanism on the other, held technical meetings to study the modalities of implementation of the national education policy. The meetings were attended by senior officials from the various partner ministers. This work is part of the National Teacher Week. They were a moment of information sharing, including the brief presentation of the National Teacher Policy and the main recommendations made during the forum of December 2020, sponsored by the President of the Republic, His Excellency Mr. Ismail Omar Gelle. In addition, these meetings allowed to the formalization of a partnership framework aiming at concrete planning, the exploitation of perspectives on the short, medium, and long terms, and the sustainability of actions. The Minister of Women and Family, Madam Muna Usman Aden, to follow up her visit to the interior regions by going to Arta. On Monday, October 11, 2021, after the usual greetings of all protocols, the Minister began her working meeting with the population of Arta on the progress of achievements of the MFF in the region. The debate was rich and instructive, and it gave the Minister an overview of the actions of the Ministry. Some solutions to overcome the difficulties raised were even identified during this exchange. Having noted that the debate was dominated by the economic aspects, Madam Muna recalled that this was not the only area to improve, but also take into account the family welfare by emphasizing the fight against all forms of violence affecting women and children through juvenile delinquency. Because she said it is within strong and united homes that are built a society with values for optimal social cohesion. As part of the 7th edition of the International Exhibition of African Textiles, to be held on 28 October 2021 in Djibouti under the patronage of President Ismail Omar Gelle, the Director of Trade, Tourism and Handicrafts, Mr. Abdullah Dahir Hassan, made a statement. He said that training in the field of crafts and e-commerce will be provided by international expertise from 13 to 25 October. 2021. A workshop on the appropriation of civil society organizations under instruments of promotion and protection of human rights was organized this morning at Sheraton Hotel by the National Commission of Human Rights of Djibouti. It is about getting familiar with the international bodies and treaties by recalling that the Republic of Djibouti has signed 7 of the 9 international treaties. It is also to understand the rights and given, but also the duties that falls to all and all. Were present at this workshop besides the President by the National Commission of Human Rights of Djibouti, Mr. Saliban Umar Odin, experts, trainers in human rights, and members of different institutions and National Association of Civil Society. The National Agency for Persons with Disabilities, in collaboration with the General Inspectorate of Labor and Social Laws, has jointly organized an awareness walk in the field of visiting the different hotels and banking sectors in order to sensitize and inform the companies and social partners. This tour began this morning at the Sheraton Hotel, Salam Bank, and Kang Bank, where the delegation of the AMPH and the General Inspection of Labor were welcomed by the officials of each institution. The main objective of awareness is part of strengthening the employability of people with disabilities in the workplace. The native of this sensitization mission is to inform all the social partners about the degree bearing particular provisions of the conditions of employment of disabled persons. A fire broke out today around 11 a.m. in the district of Section 7, Bus Street 18 and 19 in the commune of Baros. 26 houses in which people lived, owners and tenants, were destroyed by the fire. The firefighters interviewed quickly and no victims were reported. The elements of civil protection have controlled the fire in this neighborhood and prevented the fire from ravaging the entire neighborhood. The police authorities and firefighters went to the scene of the fire to see the damage. An investigation is underway to determine the cause of this fire. As part of actions to fight against smuggling, the Brigade of the Ali Sabih Customs, in collaboration with elements of the police detachment of Ali Sabih, have intercepted near the outskirts of the shift town of Ali Sabih city a large quantity of contraband qat. The merchandise seized on this occasion consisted of 36 bags of qat of 70 packages, which the smugglers wanted to transport to Ali Sabih. The police and custom officers who collaborated in the success of this operation have inserted subsequently on the site the entirety of the seized goods. According to the standard procedure, enforced this quantity was transferred to the Customs Brigade and destroyed on the spot in the presence of the Chief of the Ali Sabih Customs Brigade, Mr. Muhammad Mu'min Hassan. We regret to announce the death yesterday at the military hospital of the late Anisa Ali Kayed. The deceased was born on 23/12/1953 and began her career in 1976 in the CNSS until her retirement in 2016. The deceased left behind 2 children and 9 grandchildren. May God welcome her in his eternal paradise. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Shifting focus towards the international scene. The new Afghan regime is seeking to break its diplomatic isolation and is increasing its meetings. After the British, the Americans, and the Germans, they have an appointment this Tuesday with a representative of the European Union. Faced with the imminence of a serious humanitarian crisis in this country entirely dependent on international aid, after 20 years of war, the Taliban are looking for support. But foreign powers, especially Western ones, insist on respecting human rights, especially those of women, as the Taliban imposed a brutal regime during their previous rule. By this, our beloved viewers, we conclude this edition. Thank you for being with us and make sure to tune in later for more. Have a wonderful evening and thank you.